When Sarah Walker stood in my kitchen that early morning, her hands shaking around a mug of tea, I had no idea my entire life was about to split clean in two. One moment, I was a 25-year-old mechanic thinking about oil changes and rent. The next, she looked me straight in the eyes and said words that made the floor feel like it dropped away under my feet. "The baby in my belly is yours." My name is Luke Benson. I live in a quiet suburb just outside Omaha, Nebraska. It's the kind of place where every house looks similar, and every street feels familiar. White fences, trimmed lawns, and neighbors who wave but never really ask how you are doing. I rent a small 2-bedroom wooden house with a leaky garage. The kind of place that smells like motor oil no matter how much you clean. It's not much, but it's mine. I work as an auto mechanic at a small garage downtown. My days are filled with grease-stained hands, worn tools, and customers who swear the noise in their engine just started yesterday. The job is steady. It pays the bills. My life has been simple and predictable. Wake up before sunrise, brew black coffee, drive my old Ford pickup while country music plays on the radio, fix cars, come home tired, repeat. That morning started like any other. The air was cool with an early fall chill. Leaves were turning gold outside my window, crunching under my boots as I moved around the kitchen. I was wiping grease stains off the counter from a late-night engine project when I heard a soft knock at the door. Not loud or demanding, just hesitant. I opened the door and saw Sarah standing there. She's my neighbor. She lives next door in a neat little bungalow with a small garden out back. Sarah is 36, quiet and kind. She works from home as a freelance editor. We've lived next to each other for about a year. Our interactions had always been polite. A wave over the fence, a short chat about the weather, cookies at Christmas, nothing more. But that morning, she looked different. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun like she hadn't slept. She wore an oversized gray sweatshirt that hung loose over her body. Her blue-gray eyes looked tired and heavy, like she had been carrying something alone for too long. I asked if everything was okay. She hesitated, then asked if she could come in. Her voice was calm, but I could hear something breaking underneath it. I made her tea while she sat at the kitchen table. The radio played softly in the background, an old country song about lost love. My kitchen looked like a single guy lived there. Toolboxes, manuals, yesterday's coffee mug, nothing warm or welcoming. She wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into it. The silence stretched until it felt loud. Finally, she looked up at me. "Luke," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to change everything." My stomach tightened. I sat down across from her, my heart beating faster for reasons I couldn't explain yet. I told her she could tell me anything. She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly. "I'm pregnant." The words didn't register at first. I just stared at her confused. Then she said the rest. "The baby is yours." The room went quiet. The radio faded into noise. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind raced backward, landing on one night I had tried desperately to forget. A month earlier, my girlfriend of 3 years had ended things with a text message. She said I was too stuck in my routine, that she needed more. I had sat alone on my porch that night, heartbroken and drunk on cheap whiskey and regret. Sarah had walked by and stopped. She didn't turn away. She sat with me. She listened. We talked for hours about her divorce, about my absent father, about loneliness, about feeling like we were never enough. One thing led to another. We both pretended it never happened the next day, but now she was sitting in front of me telling me it did. She told me she was 12 weeks along, that she had been to the doctor, that she had not been with anyone else, that she had thought about keeping it to herself, but she couldn't. I stared at her stomach, hidden beneath the sweatshirt, and felt fear like I had never known before. Fatherhood, responsibility, a future I had never planned for. I asked if she was sure. She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Luke, I'm sure." I didn't know what to say. I barely knew how to breathe. After a long moment, I finally spoke, my voice shaking, and that was when I asked the question that surprised even me. "Will we get married?" The moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could pull them back and look at them first. Not because I didn't mean them, but because I didn't understand them yet. Will we get married? sounded huge in the quiet kitchen, heavier than the baby news itself. Sarah didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, searching my face like she was trying to figure out if I was offering hope or panic dressed up as responsibility. She finally exhaled and shook her head gently. "Luke," she said, "I'm not asking for that. I'm not here to trap you or force a future you don't want. I just wanted you to know the truth." Her voice was steady, but her hands gave her away. They were trembling again. I swallowed hard and leaned back in my chair. "I'm not running," I said. "I just need time to understand what this means." Quote. She nodded, stood up slowly, and told me she would be next door if I wanted to talk more. Then she left, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving me alone with a cold cup of tea and a life that suddenly felt unfamiliar. I didn't go to work that day. I paced my house like a caged animal. Every thought circled back to the same place. A baby. My baby. I thought about my own father, how he left when I was 10 and never looked back. I remembered my mom working double shifts, coming home exhausted but still smiling at me like everything was fine. I promised myself long ago I would never be that man who disappeared. By late afternoon, I could not sit with it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and a small box of cookies I had baked the night before. They were the only thing I could think to bring, some kind of peace offering. I walked next door, every step heavier than the last, and knocked. Sarah answered the door after a moment. Her eyes softened when she saw me. She stepped aside and let me in. Her house felt different from mine. Warm, organized, lived in. It smelled like tea and clean laundry instead of oil and coffee. We sat at her small kitchen table, rain tapping lightly against the window. I asked her if she planned to keep the baby. She did not hesitate. "Yes, with or without you. I can do it alone if I have to." Her honesty hit harder than any accusation could have. I leaned forward and told her the truth. That I was scared. That I had no idea how to be a father, but that I wanted to be there, that I didn't want to walk away from her or the baby. She studied my face carefully. "You are young, Luke. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't want you waking up one day resenting me." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "I might mess up," I said, "but I will not leave. I cannot promise perfection, but I can promise effort." We talked for hours that afternoon, about her childhood, about my fears, about the mistakes we had both made. There were no big decisions, no dramatic promises, just an agreement to take things slow. Separate houses for now. Doctor appointments together. Honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. Over the next few weeks, something quiet began to change. I started stopping by in the mornings with bread or milk. When her nausea hit, I learned how to make soup and ginger tea. I fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom, hung shelves in her office. Small things, practical things, but each one felt like a thread tying me closer to her life. Some days were hard. Hormones made her emotional. Fear made me quiet. We snapped at each other once or twice, only to apologize minutes later in the kitchen. I learned when to give her space and when to sit beside her in silence. She learned that I showed care through action more than words. One evening, after a long day, she looked at me across the table and asked a simple question. "What if you stayed?" I did not pretend not to understand. "Move in?" I asked. She nodded, vulnerable and hopeful all at once. I agreed without thinking. That night, I packed a bag and crossed the driveway with more certainty than I had ever felt before. We did not rush into romance. We held each other. We talked. We slept side by side with the rain tapping softly against the windows. It was not a fairy tale. It was something quieter and stronger. But just when life began to feel steady, another knock came. One that brought judgment, fear, and a test I did not see coming. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet adjustments. The mornings were the hardest. I would wake up early, before the sun was fully up, and watch Sarah sleeping beside me. Her hair spread out across the pillow like a dark halo, her breath soft and steady. The soft rise and fall of her chest reminded me that things had changed, that we were changing together, whether we were ready or not. I found myself making more decisions than I ever had before, little things that I never would have thought twice about. Grocery shopping wasn't just about picking up what I needed for the week. It was about picking up things Sarah might crave in the middle of the night. Soup, crackers, pickles. I made sure we had ginger tea in the pantry and that the bathroom had more than enough of the things she needed when the nausea hit. Every day felt like I was learning a new part of this life, one that was more complicated, more demanding, and yet, strangely, more rewarding. One evening, after work, I came home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her hand resting lightly on her stomach. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the lamp beside her. Her eyes were tired, and there was a distant look to her face. "Hey," I said, slipping off my shoes and moving to sit beside her. "What's on your mind?" She smiled softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've been thinking about everything. You, me, the baby. What comes next?" I nodded, unsure of how to respond. I hadn't even figured out everything I needed to know about myself yet, let alone about being a father. "Sarah," I started, trying to find the right words. "I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the future looks like for us, but I know I want to be here. With you. For this baby." Her gaze softened and she reached for my hand. "I know, Luke, but it's not just about us. It's about everything. The future. The choices we'll have to make. The way things will change. And how I'm not sure I'll ever be able to give you the life you deserve." Her words hit me harder than I expected. There was fear in her voice, and it scared me. I pulled her closer, wrapping my arms around her, trying to offer the reassurance I didn't know how to find. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice low, my lips brushing her hair. "You're the life I want. I don't need a perfect life. I just need you. And the baby. That's enough for me." She let out a shaky breath and nodded, but I could see the doubt still clinging to her. "I'm scared too," she confessed, her voice muffled against my chest. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm ready for everything that's about to change." "I'm scared too," I admitted, pulling back slightly to look at her face. "But we're going to do it together. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to do this alone." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine as though looking for the truth in what I was saying. After a beat, she smiled, her face softening. "I'm glad you're here, Luke. I really am." Life settled into a rhythm. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. The small moments started to feel like everything. I found myself making breakfast on Sunday mornings, the smell of bacon and eggs filling the small house while Sarah sipped her coffee on the couch. We'd sit together on the porch, swing in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, watching the sun dip below the horizon. We didn't need big gestures. We didn't need grand promises. We just needed each other. But even as things began to feel more real, I could sense the pressure mounting. The little things that had been easy before, like work, finances, making sure I was doing enough, started to feel heavy. I had moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if I was enough for Sarah, enough for the baby. And then one afternoon, the doubts hit harder than before. I had just come home from work and was standing at the sink, washing my hands, when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone knocking at the door. I dried my hands quickly, my heart already starting to race. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there stood Sarah's mother, Helen. This time, she didn't have a suitcase. She wasn't angry or defensive. She just stood there, her arms crossed in front of her like a shield. I stepped aside, allowing her to come in. Sarah was at the table, going over some baby names we had been tossing around, and when she saw her mother, her face tightened, but she stood up, walking over to greet her. "Mom," Sarah said softly, her voice tight, "what are you doing here?" Helen didn't say anything at first. Instead, she walked to the window, looking out at the yard as though trying to gather her thoughts. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice low but firm, "about everything. About you, about Luke, about the baby." I froze, unsure where this was going. "I've been hard on you, Sarah. And on Luke," Helen said, her tone softer than I had ever heard it. "I never wanted to see you hurt again. But the truth is, I don't think I have the right to stand in the way of what you want. I want you to know that I respect your decision, even if I don't fully understand it." Quote, I didn't know what to say. The words hung in the air, heavy with a sense of quiet acceptance. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Helen continued, glancing at me for the first time since she entered. "I'm here because I think it's time I started supporting you both. Even if I'm scared. Even if I don't know what this all means. But I do know one thing. You're both doing the right thing by staying. By choosing each other." Sarah's face softened, and I could see the relief in her eyes as she walked over to her mother, wrapping her arms around her in a silent embrace. I stayed back, my hands in my pockets, watching the two of them, realizing just how much we had all changed. From doubt, from fear, to something stronger than any of us had expected. And in that moment, I understood something. Sometimes love isn't about knowing exactly what comes. The days after that conversation with Helen felt different. It was as if a weight had lifted from Sarah's shoulders, though she still carried the responsibility of the baby and all the changes it brought with it. But somehow her mother's acceptance, however hesitant, had cracked open something between them. It was as if we could all breathe a little easier, knowing that at least one of the barriers had come down. That afternoon, after Helen left, Sarah and I sat on the couch in the quiet of our living room. The rain had begun to fall again, the soft tapping against the windows almost soothing as we didn't speak right away. There was no need. It felt like we were on the edge of something, but we didn't have to rush into it. We'd learned to sit in the silence together just as much as in the words. "I think we should start getting things ready," Sarah finally said, her voice soft but with a quiet determination. "The baby's coming, Luke." I nodded, feeling the familiar weight of fear settling in my chest again. But this time it was different. The fear was no longer paralyzing. It was just a part of it all, something that came with the responsibility, with the love, with the commitment. "Yeah, I think so too," I said. My voice was steady, but there was a hint of nerves I couldn't quite hide. We had talked about the nursery a few times, about painting the walls and picking out furniture, but I hadn't realized how real it was until she brought it up again. We hadn't done anything major yet, but now, in that moment, I could almost feel the baby's presence in the space between us. The next weekend, we ventured out to a local store to start gathering things. A crib, a changing table, tiny clothes that made me pause each time I picked something up. All the little things that would fill our life with noise, chaos, and love. We didn't need much, but what we had began to feel like the foundation for a life that was finally taking shape. By the time we got home, my mind was spinning with everything we still had to do, and yet the excitement was slowly outweighing the fear. I was still unsure of so many things, but I was sure of this one. I wasn't walking away. This was my life now. That evening, after we had unpacked everything and put things away, I found myself standing in the middle of our small living room, looking at the things we had gathered for our baby. Clothes, a stroller, a small crib, all the things that seemed so insignificant when we were alone, but now, in this moment, felt like the world had shifted. "Hey, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet. She looked up from where she was sitting on the couch, eyes curious. "I'm scared," I admitted, looking at the things scattered around us. "But I think I'm also excited. I can't believe this is happening." Her face softened, and she stood up, walking over to me. There was no judgment in her eyes, just understanding, the kind of understanding that came from walking the same uncertain path together. "You don't have to do it all alone, Luke," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I'm right here. We're in this together." She reached for my hand, and for the first time I felt that we were truly a team. Everything we had done so far, every decision, every hard conversation, had brought us here. And somehow it was enough. "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "And I'm not going anywhere." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations and quiet moments. We set up the crib, painted the walls of the nursery a soft shade of yellow. Every little detail felt like a small victory, something that brought us closer to the life we had decided to build. But despite everything falling into place, there were still moments when I felt overwhelmed. I was still Luke Benson, the guy who fixed cars and worried about making enough to pay the bills. I wasn't the kind of guy who had all the answers, who knew how to be a father. I wasn't ready for any of this, but I was here, and I was trying. One night, As we sat on the couch after dinner, Sarah, resting her hand on her stomach as we talked about names for the baby, I asked her a question that had been weighing on me. Do you ever feel like we're just pretending to have it all figured out? Quote. She looked at me, her brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? I don't know, I said, running a hand through my hair. It just feels like everyone expects us to have a plan, to have everything in place, but we're just figuring it out as we go. She smiled softly, her hands still resting on her belly. That's all we can do, Luke. We don't need to have it all figured out. We just need to take it one day at a time. Her words were simple, but they settled over me like a blanket. I wasn't sure of anything yet. But with Sarah beside me, I knew we'd figure it out together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, baby showers, and late-night conversations about what life would look like after the baby came. But the one thing that stood out to me more than anything else was the way we had begun to lean into each other more. The small moments we shared in between the chaos of our new life. Holding hands while watching TV. Quietly cleaning up together after dinner. Simple things, but they were building something solid beneath our feet. Then, one morning, as we sat on the porch with our coffee, I asked her the one question that had been gnawing at me for weeks. Do you want to get married? She looked at me, her face softening with the weight of the question. Luke, she said slowly, do you? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I think I do. I think I've wanted to for a while, but not because we have to. Because I want to. Because you're the person I want to do this with. Her eyes softened, and she smiled, a quiet, beautiful smile that told me everything I needed to know. Then let's do it, she said simply, whenever you're ready. The next few months were a whirlwind. The baby was due any day now, and Sarah and I spent every waking hour preparing for the changes that were coming our way. I spent long hours at work, but every moment I wasn't there, I was with Sarah, making sure she had everything she needed. We finished the nursery, painted the walls a soft, calming shade of green. It felt like it was all happening too fast, but every piece of the puzzle fell into place, one day at a time. We didn't plan anything big for our wedding. There was no elaborate ceremony, no grand venue. We didn't have the time, and frankly, it didn't feel necessary. We were already creating a family, one moment at a time. But we knew we needed to make it official. It wasn't about a big gesture. It was about us, our commitment, and the future we were building together. One evening, after a long day of work, I came home to find Sarah in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of homemade soup filled the house, and I couldn't help but smile. She looked up as I walked in, a tired but content expression on her face. Her pregnancy was starting to show, her belly round and full, and I found myself in awe of her. Hey, I said, slipping my jacket off and hanging it by the door. How was your day? Long, she replied, a small smile curling on her lips. But I'm glad you're home. I walked over and kissed her on the forehead, taking in the sight of her in the kitchen. It wasn't glamorous or romantic in the typical sense, but it was perfect. We were building a life here, a life that was ours. I was thinking, I said, my voice low as I wrapped my arms around her waist. Maybe we should make it official. Just you and me. Get married, make it real. Her hands paused for a moment, then she turned to face me. Her eyes were soft, full of something deeper than just love, trust. I could see it there, clear as day. Are you sure? She asked, her voice quiet. You don't have to do this for me, Luke. I took her hands in mine, my heart pounding in my chest. No, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for us, for this family we're building. Her smile spread wider, and I could see the relief in her eyes, the joy that I had finally said what she needed to hear. I've been thinking about it too, she said softly, and I'm ready, Luke. Let's do it. That night, after dinner, we sat together on the couch. We didn't have the grand proposal or a ring, but we didn't need that. We had something stronger. Trust, love, and a commitment to one another that couldn't be measured by a ceremony. I'm glad you're here, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, my voice firm, though I wasn't sure I had ever meant anything more in my life. The next week, we went to the courthouse. Just the two of us. We didn't tell anyone in advance. It wasn't about making a statement to the world. It was about making a promise to each other. We stood before a judge, exchanged vows, and signed the paperwork that made it official. It was simple, it was small, but it was ours. And just like that, we were married. The next few weeks passed quickly. Sarah's due date was drawing near, and the excitement in the air was almost palpable. We spent our evenings together, me making sure the house was ready, Sarah working on finalizing everything for the baby. We didn't talk much about the wedding after it happened. It didn't feel like something that needed constant attention. We both knew the promise we had made to each other, and we were ready to move forward, hand in hand. Then, one morning, the phone rang. It was early, still dark outside, and I had just finished getting ready for work when the call came. "Luke." Sarah's voice was breathless, her words hurried. "It's time." "I think it's time." My heart jumped into my throat, and everything inside me stilled. "Are you sure?" Quote. "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady now, but I could hear the excitement building underneath. "I'm having contractions. You need to get here." I grabbed my keys, rushing out the door and into the truck, my heart pounding as I drove toward the hospital. The world outside seemed to move in slow motion, and every moment felt like an eternity. I couldn't wait to see our baby, to finally hold her in my arms. When I got to the hospital, Sarah was already in the delivery room. Her mother Helen was there too, but Sarah had asked her to stay in the waiting area. She wanted this to be between us. The hours stretched on as we waited. Every time Sarah's contraction hit, she would squeeze my hand, and I would tell her over and over how much I loved her. And then, after what felt like an eternity, it was time. I stood by her side as she pushed, each moment more intense than the last, until finally the doctor handed our daughter to me, Lily Margaret Benson. She was perfect. Small, pink, and wriggling in my arms. Her little hands grasped at the air, her eyes opening wide for the first time. The moment I looked into her eyes, something inside me clicked. This was real. This was my family. Sarah watched me, tears in her eyes as I held our daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "She is," Sarah said, her voice shaky as she reached for our daughter. We named her Lily Margaret Benson. Lily for the flowers Sarah loved, and Margaret after her mother. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, baby bottles, diapers, and exhaustion. But in the midst of the chaos, I felt something I had never felt before. Contentment. As I sat in the quiet of the night, with Sarah beside me and Lily asleep in her crib, I realized that this was my life now. A life I never could have planned for, but one I was more than happy to live. And I knew without a doubt that no matter what the future held, I would never regret this. We were a family, and that was all I ever needed. The months after Lily was born were both a blur and a beautiful clarity. We adjusted to the rhythm of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and the small, quiet moments that made up our new life. The house felt alive in a way it never had before, the sound of Lily's laughter filling every room, the soft cooing when she woke up in the morning. And then, there were the quiet moments when it was just Sarah and me, sitting on the couch, the weight of our daughter's presence between us. I never thought I'd be this guy, the guy who couldn't imagine his life without his child, without his wife. I used to think I was content with simple. But now simple had become everything. Waking up beside Sarah, the smell of baby powder in the air, the laughter shared over breakfast. And yet, despite the warmth that filled our home, there were days when I still struggled. I wasn't always the perfect dad. Sometimes I fumbled with bottles, or I'd forget to grab the right-sized diaper from the store. But Sarah, she never faltered. She kept me grounded, steady, reminding me that parenting was about showing up, even when you weren't sure of your next step. One afternoon, when Lily was about 6 months old, we took her to the park for the first time. The sun was shining brightly and there was a soft breeze in the air, the kind of day that made you forget everything else. I pushed the stroller as Sarah walked beside me, holding Lily's tiny hand in hers. "She's growing so fast," Sarah said, her voice soft but full of wonder. I smiled. watching our daughter as she cooed happily in the stroller. Yeah. It's like every time I blink, she's a little bigger. We found a spot on the grass and sat down, the sun casting a golden glow over everything. Lily giggled as I made faces at her, and for the first time I truly understood what it meant to be her father. It wasn't just about the big moments like the birth or the wedding. It was the little moments, the ones where we were just us, all three of us, together. As I sat there, holding Lily and watching Sarah smile, I realized that my life had changed in ways I hadn't even known were possible. I was no longer just Luke, the mechanic, or Luke, the guy who was stuck in a routine. I was a father, I was a husband, I was part of something bigger than myself. And then, just as I thought about how perfect this moment was, Sarah turned to me and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Do you ever regret staying?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I blinked, surprised by the question, but then, without hesitation, I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice steady and sure. "I've never regretted it, not for 1 second. You, Lily, this is everything I never knew I wanted. I can't imagine being anywhere else but right here." She smiled, her eyes welling with tears, and leaned over to kiss me softly. It wasn't a grand, passionate kiss, but it was everything I needed. It was a reminder of how far we'd come and how much we still had ahead of us. The next year brought more changes, more firsts for Lily. First steps, first words, first time she tried to climb onto the couch and fell flat on her face, only to giggle and try again. Sarah and I continued to grow into this life we had built. Some days were harder than others, but every day was worth it. I had my moments of doubt. Still, there were nights when the weight of responsibility felt too much, when I wondered if I was doing enough. But those moments passed quickly, overshadowed by the love I saw in Sarah's eyes, the laughter I heard from Lily, and the life we were building, one small step at a time. As for Helen, she came around. Slowly, she started visiting more often. At first, she didn't approve of everything, how young we were, how much we still had to learn. But as she watched us together, as she saw how we cared for Lily, she began to soften. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep in her crib, Helen sat down across from us at the table. "I didn't think you two had it in you," she said, her voice hesitant but full of something close to pride. "But I see it now. You're doing well. You're doing good by her, Luke. I'm proud of you." It was the first time I had ever heard her say that, and though it wasn't perfect, it was enough. I wasn't the man she had imagined for her daughter, and I never would be. But I was the man who was here, who was trying, who was learning to be the best father I could be. And in that moment, I realized that was enough. A few years later, Sarah and I sat in the living room, watching Lily run around the house, her hair a wild mess, and her energy endless. It had been a few years since that day at the hospital, since the moment that had changed everything for us. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Sarah asked, her voice full of wonder as she watched our daughter. I looked over at Sarah, the woman who had changed my life in more ways than I could count. My wife, the mother of our child, the woman who had stood by me, who had trusted me with her heart, with our future. "No," I said, my voice full of awe. "But I'm so glad we did." In that moment, I knew that this life was everything I had ever wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every messy, beautiful, chaotic moment of it. And I wouldn't change a thing,